We grow up believing, the more friends you have, the better. The more relationships you maintain, the more successful you are. So we try to hold on. We try to maintain connections. We try not to disappoint anyone. We try to stay, even when we feel drained inside. But there is a simple truth. Not every relationship supports you. Some relationships drain you. Not immediately, but gradually. After spending time with them, you feel tired. After conversations, you feel heavy. After interactions, you feel less like yourself. And yet, because of habit, because of fear of losing people, because of loneliness, you stay. One important thing to understand is this. Compassion does not mean keeping everyone in your life. Compassion does not mean tolerating everything. True compassion includes protecting your own energy, knowing when to open and when to step back. Because if you are always open, without boundaries, you will slowly become exhausted. And when you are exhausted, you cannot give anything real. There is also something very subtle. It's not only bad people who drain you. Some people have no bad intentions. But the way they live does not align with you. They may be constantly negative, always complaining, always carrying heavy energy, and if you stay close for too long, you get pulled into that state. Not because you are weak, but because the human mind is influenced by its environment. So choosing your relationships is not selfish. It is awareness. You don't need many people. You need the right people. People who make you feel lighter, clearer, more like yourself. A healthy relationship does not drain you. It supports you. An unhealthy one pulls you away from who you are. And if you don't notice, you may stay in that imbalance for a long time. Today, I'm not inviting you to judge anyone. This is not about labeling people. It's about becoming aware of your own experience. After being around someone, how do you feel? Lighter or heavier? Because that feeling is always honest. In the next part, we will explore 5 types of people. Not to judge them, but to recognize them, so you can protect your peace. In a deeper perspective, the first type of person you need to be aware of is not someone bad. It's someone who is constantly negative. And this is subtle, because they're not attacking you. They're not trying to hurt you. They may even seem normal on the surface. But the way they see life is consistently heavy. Everything feels difficult. People are always a problem. The future is something to worry about. And if you spend enough time around them, you start to feel the same way. The real issue is not what they say. It's the energy they carry. You might have a simple conversation. Nothing dramatic. But afterward, you feel drained, tired, heavier, for no clear reason. Here's something important to understand. We don't just communicate through words. We influence each other through our internal state. If you're around someone who is always tense, you begin to feel tense. If you're around someone who constantly complains, you start seeing things through that same lens. Not because you're weak, but because the human mind naturally sinks. And this happens quietly. You don't notice it right away. But over time, it becomes part of how you think. Another important point is this. Negative people usually don't see themselves as negative. They think they're being realistic. They think they're just seeing the truth. But there's a difference. They don't just notice problems. They live in them. They don't just acknowledge difficulty. They hold on to it. And if you stay close, you begin to adopt that same perspective. This doesn't mean you need to cut them off completely. You don't always need to walk away. But you do need awareness. You need to know when to listen and when to step back. You don't have to absorb everything they say. You can hear without carrying it. You can understand without becoming it. A simple question you can ask yourself is, how do I feel after being around this person? Lighter or heavier? If the answer is heavier, pay attention. No need to judge them. Just protect your energy. Because compassion does not mean staying in negative environments. Compassion also means not allowing yourself to be pulled down. You can care without carrying. You can understand without absorbing. And sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is not let yourself get dragged into that energy. The second type of person to be aware of is not obviously negative. It's the one who constantly complains. At first, this may seem normal. Everyone complains sometimes. Everyone needs to express their struggles. But here, we're talking about a pattern. A repeated way of living. A mindset. Everything becomes something to complain about. Work isn't right. People aren't right. The situation isn't right. And most importantly, there's always someone else to blame. There's always a reason outside of them. A person, a situation, an external cause. But rarely do they look inward. And this is where the weight comes in. Because when you're around someone like this, you get pulled into a loop. They talk, you listen, they complain, you empathize, but then it repeats. Nothing changes. No movement forward. No real solution. Just the same story, over and over again. At first, you may want to help. You listen carefully. You offer advice. You suggest solutions. But if they're not truly open to change, nothing shifts. And over time, you feel drained. Not because they're a bad person, but because you're stuck in a loop, with no exit. A loop where the problem is repeated, but never resolved. It's important to understand this. Complaining is not wrong, but if it becomes constant, it becomes a burden. Blaming is not entirely wrong, but if everything is always someone else's fault, there is no space for growth. And without growth, the relationship keeps you stuck. Another subtle truth is this. People who constantly complain often don't realize it. They believe they are just sharing. They believe they need to be heard. And yes, they do. But without awareness, that sharing becomes a continuous flow, with no direction. And if you're not careful, you become the container, holding their stories, their emotions, their repetition. And slowly, you begin to feel heavy too. Here's the key. Compassion does not mean listening endlessly. It does not mean fixing everything. It does not mean always being available for the same cycle. You can listen, without getting pulled in. You can understand, without carrying it. You can care, while still holding your boundary. One simple shift is this. When you notice the conversation repeating, don't feed the pattern. You don't need to cut them off harshly. You don't need to react. Just don't continue the loop. Because if you keep engaging, the cycle never ends. Today, I want to invite you to ask yourself something honestly. Is there someone in your life who tells the same story over and over, without change? You don't need to judge them. Just recognize, am I in a loop? And if so, do I need to stay in it forever? The third type of person you need to be aware of is not always obvious. They don't yell at you. They don't attack you directly. They don't create big conflict. But they do something very subtle. They make you feel like you're not enough. Their words may sound harmless. You could do better. Why can't you be like others? I don't think you're trying hard enough. At first, it sounds reasonable. It sounds like feedback. It sounds like they care. But if you stay around them long enough, you begin to notice something deeper. You start to lose yourself. You begin to doubt your abilities, your worth, your direction. Here's something important to understand. Not all feedback helps you grow. Some feedback comes from comparison, from ego, from the need to control. And when you absorb it, you don't grow. You shrink. A clear sign is this. After being around them, you don't feel motivated. You don't feel inspired. You feel heavy. There's a subtle discomfort that's hard to explain, but it's always there. Another important truth is this. People like this often don't realize what they're doing. They believe they're helping. They believe they're being honest. They believe they're just telling the truth. But real truth does not make you feel smaller. When truth comes from understanding, it brings clarity, not self-doubt. Here's where it becomes dangerous. If you stay in an environment where you are constantly criticized, you begin to believe it, not because it's true, but because you hear it repeatedly. And once you believe it, you limit yourself. You hesitate. You hold back. You stop expressing yourself. Not because you're incapable, but because you've been conditioned to feel that way. And that's the real damage. Not their words, but how you begin to see yourself through those words. Compassion here does not mean staying. It does not mean tolerating everything. Compassion also means recognizing you deserve to be in an environment that lifts you, not one that pulls you down. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to fight them. But you do need clarity. This is not healthy for me. You can listen to feedback. But you don't have to accept all of it. You can grow without losing yourself. You can improve without believing you are not enough. Today, I want to invite you to reflect honestly. Is there someone in your life who makes you feel smaller every time you're around them? No need to decide immediately. Just notice that feeling, because sometimes seeing clearly is the first step to protecting yourself. The fourth type of person you need to be aware of is not obviously negative, not openly critical, but someone who appears very kind, at least on the surface. They are friendly, easy to talk to. They know how to say things that make you feel good. And that's exactly why they are hard to recognize. These people don't make you uncomfortable at first. In fact, they make you feel understood, seen, connected. But over time, something starts to feel off. The relationship becomes unbalanced. You give more than you receive. You are always the one listening, helping, making time, and they show up when they need something. Here's the subtle part. They don't ask directly. They don't say, "Help me." But the way they talk, the way they share, makes you feel like you should. And so, you do. Not because you're forced, but because it feels natural. And that's what makes this dynamic so dangerous. Not because they are bad people, but because it's unclear. Manipulation is not always aggressive. Sometimes, it's soft, subtle, difficult to name. You don't feel pressured, but you do feel like you're always giving. A clear sign is this. When you need them, they're not really there. Or if they are, it's not the same depth, not the same presence. The relationship becomes one-sided. But because you've invested, because you've connected, you stay, hoping things will change. Another important point is this. People like this are often very good at creating quick connection. They say what you want to hear. They understand you quickly. They bond fast. But that connection lacks real depth. It's more like a surface, designed to keep you engaged. And if you don't notice, you can stay in it for a long time. Here's what matters. Compassion does not mean you keep giving when you are being drained. Compassion is not self-sacrifice. True compassion includes awareness. You can care, but still recognize, this is not balanced. You can understand, but still see clearly, this is costing me energy. And once you see that, you don't need to react aggressively. You don't need to cut them off suddenly. You simply step back. Stop over-giving. Stop over-engaging. Stop always being available. And then, the relationship reveals itself. If it's real, it will rebalance. If it's not, it will fade. Today, I want to ask you something honestly. Is there a relationship in your life where you are always giving, but never truly feel supported? No need to decide right now. Just notice, because sometimes, the most dangerous relationships are not the ones that hurt you immediately, but the ones that slowly drain you. The final type of person to be aware of is not the negative one. Not the one who complains. Not the one who criticizes or uses you. It's the one who makes you lose yourself. This is the deepest sign, and the hardest to recognize, because it doesn't come from one clear action. Not a specific moment, not something obvious. It happens slowly, within you. You begin to adjust, not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. You speak less, because you don't want to be judged. You become more careful, because you don't want to upset them. You change how you express yourself, to fit their expectations. At first, you may not notice. You think you're being flexible, adaptable, maintaining the relationship. But over time, something shifts. You don't feel comfortable. You don't feel natural. You don't feel free. You feel like you have to be a different version of yourself around this person. A very clear sign is this. When you're not around them, you feel lighter. You breathe easier. You return to yourself. But when you're with them, you shrink. And that matters. Because a healthy relationship does not require you to become someone else. It allows you to be who you are. Here's something deeper. If you stay too long in a relationship that pulls you away from yourself, you begin to forget who you are. You lose touch with what you like, what you think, what you want. You start living based on reactions, based on approval, based on external validation. And that's when you disconnect from yourself. That's the real danger. Not that the other person is bad, but that you are drifting away from who you are without realizing it. Compassion does not mean sacrificing yourself to keep a relationship. True compassion includes not harming yourself. You can care about someone. You can value the connection. But if you have to lose yourself to keep it, the cost is too high. A healthy relationship does not make you smaller, does not make you hide, does not make you shrink. It allows you to feel natural, comfortable, real. You don't need to leave immediately. You don't need to make a big decision. Just start by returning to yourself. Ask, when I'm around this person, am I still me? If the answer is no, pause. You don't need to react. Just see it clearly, because once you truly see, you won't be able to continue the same way.